Welcome to the Character Sheet, comicbook.com's official home for all things tabletop and fantasy. I am Christian Hoffer. Today, I am joined by my amazing co-host Hannah and three wonderful special guests, Jon Peterson, Michael Witwer, and Kyle Newman. And today, we've had all of these folks on the channel before, but we're here to talk today about a new project, the Deck of Many Morsels. Now, if you're wondering, what is the Deck of Many Morsels? Well, it sounds like a card deck that contains delectable foods that perhaps inspired by Dungeons and Dragons. And I think that's exactly what it is, right?
That is correct.
Fantastic. Awesome. So first question, what was the inspiration for this? Well, first and foremost, let's dial it back. This is not your first D&D food related thing. How exactly did you capture the market on food and Dungeons and Dragons?
Yeah, I can take a crack at that one and get us maybe to the Deck of Many Morsels. Obviously, a play on the Deck of Many Things for those of you who know D&D. Actually, what the way this all came about to us originally was that we were just finishing up the first project we all did together called Art Arcana, which was a kind of a 45-year visual history of Dungeons and Dragons, and it was just a really fun project. We just loved doing it. It was a really, really formative project for all of us. And the project had gone so well. We had this great experience with Penguin Random House. 10 Speed specifically was the publisher. And it was at that point that the publisher of 10 Speed came to us, a gentleman named Aaron Wayner. And he happens to also be the publisher of a group called Clarkson Potter. And he said, hey, I know a thing or two about cookbooks, and I've had an idea for a while to do a D&D cookbook. And we're like, oh, interesting. And he said, yeah, I published some good cookbooks, like Barefoot Contessa, for example. We're like, oh, this guy does know cookbooks. So what we ended up starting to talk about was this idea that we wanted to create a cookbook that was not a gimmicky cookbook. It wasn't going to be D&D chicken fingers and so forth. It was going to be really something that really brought you into the world of D&D, a book that really you would eat the very food that your characters would eat in D&D, right? That was really the intent. So it was really a group project in the respect that we teamed up with some of the best people at 10 Speed Clarkson Potter. They paired us up with a world-class chef in Adam Reed from America's Test Kitchen and a bunch of production designers, photographers, stylists. And we all put our heads together and basically said, how are we going to bring D&D to life? How are we going to bring D&D to life? The very food that, again, your characters might eat, or even better, what if you and your group might make some of these dishes before even use them in game to kind of create and enhance that visceral experience of playing D&D at the tabletop? So that, in a nutshell, was how we got into the cookbook business. And that first book came out in October of 2020 called Heroes Feast, named after, of course, a famous D&D spell. And we seem to hit the mark in a lot of the right places. And since then, there's been a sequel cookbook. There's been a show by the same name called Heroes Feast. And then now, of course, we've got the Deck of Many Morsels.
So what exactly, Deck of Many Morsels, from what I understand, more smaller food fare, like cocktails and mocktails, desserts, things like that. How did you decide, what was the theming around making a card deck full of recipes?
Well, for us, I thought there's something exciting about taking the greatest hits of book 1 and book 2, peppering it with some new recipes. We've got 10 ones in this book that were added and are fresh. Finding a way to put those on almost like spell cards, which are very familiar to Dungeons and Dragons fans. Have that simplicity. You pull it out, it's right there. The image, the recipe. You don't have to mess with a book. It felt like it made sense. All your components are right there listed for you. And there was an element of ease to it. And it also gave us a new theme, which was going for trying to curate the simpler appetizers, drinks, things that are going to be great for tabletop and gaming. So it was a great idea that was pitched to us, and we embraced it. And we said, let's run with it. Obviously, decks, like Michael said at the outset, are a big part of the D&D language. So we just ran with it.
Would you say that your own individual tastes for food and beverage while you're gaming have an influence on what goes into the various cookbooks and specifically this deck?
I mean, I'd certainly say so, in the sense that, we try, of course, to go deep into D&D lore when we construct, what are the parameters of these recipes. Think about it like we were going back to any source book that, Ed Greenwood might have written in the late 80s or early 90s, telling us exactly what the fare would have been that's served at this particular establishment in the Forgotten Realms, right? But then there's another level, of course, in which our own tastes necessarily inform this going forward. And, because we are trying to get as close as we can to that experience of what characters would be eating. Of course, we can't get entirely there, right? There's no broth in the real world, right? And so we have to kind of approximate this, let alone some of the more fantastical creations. So, we got to steer a bit towards things that are our preferred or favorite kinds of recipes. And I mean, for me gaming, my groups would always like take a break to have like dinner and then like go back if necessary to cap things off before the end of the night if we weren't like too drunk already. So the finger food aspect of it, I guess plays in less for me in the way that my group kind of worked around this stuff. But I know that a lot of food that we just liked ended up in these in the books and on these cards.
Absolutely. One of the other things that I've noticed, because every time I've played D&D recently since I've had this, I just let my group kind of grab a card from or several from the deck as a surprise, and then we go shop, and then we come back, we make whatever we pulled, and then we game. I've really enjoyed that kind of like surprise aspect, which I don't know if it was necessarily intended to be that way, but it's just been super fun for me personally.
I mean, that's the way the Deck of Many Things works, right?
Yeah,
you take
right.
a draw and you get what you get. Could be good.
It was really fun.
Surprising or challenging.
Our most recent session, we just so happened to only pull drinks out of the deck, and so we were like, this is the kind of day we're gonna have today, I guess. The other thing that I noticed is that all of these recipes are really approachable and they're time conscious, because obviously we don't want to spend too much time away from the game. We want to get back to it, and there's a longevity to a lot of them. Is that intentional when you're deciding what goes in?
Yeah, 100%. The deck, as Kyle had suggested a little bit earlier, was really intended to make the food process a bit more portable. We learned a lot of lessons from the first book, one of which is that it's just a gorgeous book. And a lot of people didn't want to get a bunch of gravy on the pages. I'm like, okay, well, that's fair. Another piece of it, though, is that a lot of the recipes, I mentioned Adam Reed, are some higher end recipes, some things that actually take a little bit, sometimes in some cases, a lot of time and resources to put together. That was by intention. We wanted some of that. We also wanted a lot of things that were more turnkey. So when we came up with the Deck of Many Things, it was a curated list of things that were a little bit more portable and more turnkey that you could use for your game. And in fact, Hannah, you did exactly as we hoped people would do, which is draw something random, go, really quick, easy shopping list right there on the card. You've got a picture on one side. You've got a simple, in some cases, distilled recipe on the other, and you can crank these things out and you can really use them for a game probably a lot easier than you can with the current books, even though a lot of people have done that and have been doing that since those books came out. So
it's funny, the cards are like the perfect size to fit in the bag that I take shopping with me, so they literally go with us when we go to the store to shop for these. Christian, what'd you have?
So Deck of Many Things. One of the fun things about that is that you never know what you're going to draw, and of course, not everything that you draw is necessarily good. We've seen things like, in like Harry Potter, they have the jelly beans where some of the flavors are terrible flavors. Did you guys ever consider doing something where the recipes were a little bit more exotic, spicy, non-traditional, to kind of keep within that theming of the deck?
We definitely try to do that. We program that into all our cookbooks, at least trying to veer where it's applicable into the unconventional or the just left of center. Obviously, you can anchor it with something familiar and then invigorate it with something that's atypical. But we do have things like crickets in our Heroes Feast 2. If we were to make future books, there would be equally exotic options. That's part of it. We love that experimentation, encouraging people to go somewhere a little off the beaten track, try something they may not be accustomed to because it's germane to, a playable species or race or culture, and it's a fun way to experience them. So that's always the goal. But there's the practicality element, which is, you still have to anchor it with stuff which can comprise, more traditional meals and, give people a familiar base. But always our goal is to how we make this a little different. So I hope that's transpired in some of the stuff. This, like we said, there's a lot more snacks, and maybe they're not Cheetos. This is not Sprite. You're getting something very different for your table that maybe, is popping up from a corner of the realms that you weren't expecting, or somewhere in the multiverse your characters never visited. That's what we love. There's lore in there too. And there's also, we encourage the customization. So if you pick this up and you're like, wow, I want this to be a little spicier, I want to go this way with it, I'm inspired to do that, I can use this as a base, then go for it. I don't think you have to stick to the letter of the law. Part of D&D is, going somewhere different. So I would say do that if you're inspired to take these as a launching point and customize. That's always the goal. And as we move forward, I think we're gonna be able to explore some of the more rare type of meats and things like that we couldn't really put into the first book.
Do we all have a favorite recipe from the deck?
I mean, Michael has certainly cooked the most of any of us in terms of he's really plowed through these things. He's maybe our food taster in our court.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, a little bit. I guess. Yeah, I am the food taster, and you're still alive, so you're welcome. Yeah. So for the new, so you know what? Let me answer that question with the new recipes. It's very easy to talk about what the favorites would be from book 1, from book 2. There's a new dish that we did that we wanted to bring in from the Afterlife Casino, which was one from one of the adventures in one of the recent anthologies from 5e, 5th edition, that were spicy sturge sliders that are really, really tasty. That was one of the new, again, net new dishes. As Kyle said, there was 10 or 12 net new dishes in addition to a recap of some existing and distillation of some existing dishes. The sturge sliders are really, really good. Kind of like a pulled pork type of situation. So I love those. And to be honest, I love how they work with the lore. So these things cannot be kind of dissociated from that. And I think that's an important piece that I probably failed to mention even when I was first talking about it, was this notion that the lore is what's always driven this stuff. Again, we're not making D&D chicken fingers. That's not the intent, or we're coming up with little puns. That's not what we're doing here. What we're trying to do is really find things that you encounter in a campaign or in a D&D session that you can literally eat at the table right there. And so it just so happens the Afterlife Casino had this really great restaurant. They were serving a bunch of these different things. And so the spicy sturge sliders are just right there. They even have some description about what they are. So it was a relatively easy thing to port over. And the recipe happens to be excellent.
So I actually have a quick question, since Jon, you're one of like the leading D&D historians that's out there. I know in more recent, D&D adventures, we see lots of examples of food. Like, how far back does like the tradition of food go back into Dungeons and Dragons? Were like the early Gygax adventures like filled with all of these like delicious descriptions of food? Was this like an Ed Greenwood thing? When exactly did food start like weaving itself into the fabric of D&D?
Oh, it goes all the way back. I mean, iron rations are one of the things that we actually have in the Deck of Many Morsels. I think we had that in Heroes Feast 1 as well. And that, of course, was something you could buy in the original equipment list of 1974 D&D. But it wasn't until, the world building started in earnest, right, that we started to see things like the Village of Hamlet, right, where you would then be able to look in the various taverns, and they would indeed have menus and price lists, and we tap things like that. All the earliest modules are the places that we sourced some of the most interesting stuff for the first cookbook. You wouldn't think that you'd be able to find a place where Impossible burgers or like Impossible meat could be substantiated from like the early D&D corpus. Oh, yes, you can. All you need is the Expedition to the Barrier Peaks, which was the Origins 2 convention module. That is 1976, right? Mm-hmm. When they actually published that as a D&D module, there's a part where there's a pantry that had this weird like synthetic meat in it. And, so we would find some way, again, to take the things that we loved and, to even up to the present, things like, lotus root, which I'm kind of a fan of, being able to look at Strixhaven and define like, black lotus root as something that is available in that we can make a dish out of. That was the lore job of this. And the good news is there's 50 years worth of lore for us to mine for it.
So obviously, in addition to the Deck of Many Morsels, the three of you are, prolific partners at this point, working on various books and other projects. What else do you have that's coming up?
Well, John, do you want to start with what we've got coming up in November? That's a pretty exciting little tome
I don't know.
right
Am
there.
I allowed to reveal it on camera for this?
100%. 100%.
You got to have the
Oh.
2001. Yes, the monolith. Wait, my head needs to come over it then. It'd be like the planet peeking up. No, so we have actually a special 50th anniversary edition of our book Art Arcana from back in 2018. And this isn't like a whole completely redone thing. What we've done with this is update a couple of the pictures that were in it, because since 2018 we've been able to find a bit more of the original art. And so things where we only just kind of had scans of product in the initial edition, we just kind of silently upgraded those for some things that actually have some pretty spectacular reveals in them. But those we don't even bother to call out, right? And we did a number of other like little tweaks like that. But the main thing people will notice is the presence of 6 gatefolds. And the gatefolds are really cool. I don't know how well they're going to show up here on camera, but the gatefolds let you get a just a little bit more art here. And so this is obviously related to a certain temple that
of elemental
one
evil.
or more elemental evils. And with that, we're able to show some additional maps, including early draft maps of the temple that date from early 1980. This is a module that didn't get published until 1985, though of course work on it really began in 1976 as kind of the house campaign of TSR at their little office in the Gray House at 723 William Street in Lake Geneva. But that is just one of many gatefolds that have some additional cool content that we have snuck in for this, because we love Dungeons and Dragons and we love celebrating its 50th anniversary.
Okay.
Yeah, as you can see, everything we do, it's especially when it's a cookbook or whatever it is, the research doesn't stop. What John and the team were able to unearth for the Art Arcana 50th anniversary edition is awesome. It's definitely worth checking out, especially if you don't have the first one. And all of our cooking endeavors, cookbook endeavors, are research first and with an eye on immersion. We want that to be an element, another sensory experience you can add to the tabletop. That's what the game's all about. It's about that veracity and that immersion. And so it's got to check those boxes for us. We really try to avoid the gimmick and make it authentic. So, we look backwards into everything from, modules, novels, Dragon Magazine articles. We call from everywhere. And I think that's essential. That's why people have been responding to the Heroes Feast cookbook series. I think that's why it's earned a show and why we're moving forward into cool things like decks. Hopefully we get to do more decks. They're super durable. They feel like high end. When I opened it, I was like, feeling it. I was like, this is awesome. It felt like they're not water resistant, but it felt water resistant. It felt like it could withstand the, endure whatever's on your countertop. But it was like it just made sense. You're like, oh my God, this is so D&D. And it's such a great gift size, which is the other thing. You're like, oh, this is perfect. So, and even if you have the book, it's just another way to experience it. And I think it's got the lore in there too. It seems like it's a card, doesn't have a lot of real estate, but we do try to program it with in-universe facts and figures.
And I'm just going through it here a little bit.
That was great.
Black Lotus root. Yeah.
There it is. I've often joked that the Deck of Many Things is the best thing to come in a small wood grain brown box since original Dungeons and Dragons in 1974.
Fake wood grain, just like my family's old station wagon. I love it.
Yep. It's actually almost the same size, right? John's probably got one next to him or something. But
I got a white box. Here's a white. That's a white box, a little bigger.
Yeah, a little bit. But yeah, so the original D&D, for those of you who don't know, came in an original wood grain brown box, like very similar to this. So it's pretty cute. But this thing, I have to say, candidly, when it came in the mail for me, and yes, I'm an interested party, but it blew me away with regard to its quality. I did not expect the cards to be so big, so durable, just so beautifully put together. And again, that should not be surprising because 10-speed Clarkson Potter, everything they do is really beautiful. So we're very, very fortunate to have a partner in them that really has the same standards as us when it comes to just production, beauty, quality, color. They just know how to do it.
Okay. Well, I only have one last question for you, and that's when does this come out?
This is coming out in early October. I believe, is it October 5th, the date, team?
I remember, yes, but I'm now I'm
October
going to
1st. October 1st. And
1st.
then and I believe the Art Arcana 50th is coming out November 1st, right at the beginning. So
yeah, beginning of November.
Yep, this October 1st, it's going to be everywhere. Obviously, it's up for pre-order at various locations at a nice discount. And yeah, we're super proud of it.
Well, it looks fantastic. I can't wait to get my hands on it. Hannah's been showing me cards for weeks, and it is a shame that I have not gotten to taste any of the food that she's made from it yet, and that's all I'll say about that. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming on and talking about the deck. This was an awesome conversation, as always. Always love having you guys on. In addition to the deck, be sure to check out Art Arcana. They've done multiple cookbooks, multiple art books. So be sure to check out all of that too. And I'm sure it won't be too long before more projects get announced, and I'm sure they'll be here on the character sheet to talk about them. On that note, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, follow us on the social medias, do all the things that you need to do to keep the algorithm hopping. And that's really all I got. So until next time, thank you so much for watching.